Welcome back to the third episode of SCROTUS. I will laugh every time I say that just because it's funny. So our third case that has, again, just as the last two, has already had its oral argument at the Supreme Court. But this one's particularly interesting to me because it deals with a linguistic thing.
Oh.
So this case is called Pulsifer versus United States. And as I kept reading about it, it dawned on me that this case basically, saw Bill Clinton question the definition of the word is.
Depends on what the definition of is.
Right. And said, hold my beer. Because this entire case revolves around the use, meaning, and semantics of the word and.
Oh.
There's some lengthy, backstory to this that I'll condense here, but it all revolves around that word and what does and mean in this particular place in a statute.
Right.
So Mark Pulsifer has a history of nonviolent drug offenses, and most recently he pleaded guilty, in the U.S. District Court of Southern Iowa to one count of distributing at least 15 grams of methamphetamine.
Oh.
So basically, I don't know, he was helping some Iowa housewife lose weight that didn't and this was before Ozempic came around. So
I was gonna say.
But due to his record of previous he had one drug felony prior, I believe. He was up for a mandatory minimum sentencing of 15 years. However, in 2018, under the Trump administration, there was a new provision added to the sentencing statute known as a safety valve. So it's supposed to ease punishments for nonviolent drug offenders.
Right.
Which Trump got a lot of praise for, I believe.
Yeah.
Or it was under his administration.
That was the Alice provision.
Right. But the safety valve, as they call it, had some built-in caveats so as not to allow for or encourage repeat offenders in certain, regards.
Right.
So, subsection F of 18 U.S.C. 3553 is entitled Limitation of Applicability of Statutory Minimums in Certain Cases. So this is the new caveat that was written in 2018. It contains 5 requirements that a defendant must meet in order to have lightened sentencing.
Okay.
The first requirement, though, has 3 sub-requirements. So, Mr. Pulsifer applied for this safety valve provision.
Right.
Saying, his defense said, Mr. Pulsifer meets 4 of your 5 requirements, but the question is that first requirement with the sub-requirements.
Right.
So the statute reads, that first requirement reads, the defendant does not have A, more than 4 criminal history points, excluding any criminal history points resulting from a 1-point offense, B, a prior 3-point offense as determined under the sentencing guidelines, and C, a prior 2-point offense as determined under the sentencing guidelines.
So you can't have any of those.
Right.
You have to have it's all 0 on those.
This is the question.
Right.
So the statute says A, B, and C.
Right.
So what does that mean? Mark Pulsifer and his counsel admit that he satisfies both A and B of those 3
but not C
requirements, but he does not satisfy C as to his one previous felony. So they contend that the word and stipulates that the defendant must check all 3 items, A, B, and C, to be disqualified from reduced sentencing. So they're saying, because the word and is there, he has to have done A and B and C
right.
in order to be disqualified from a reduction of sentencing.
Right.
The district court disagreed. So the district court said, in this case, in the statute, and more closely means or.
What?
So that if you check even one of the 3 boxes, you are not considered for reduced sentencing.
That's just rewriting the law.
This is the entire question of this case.
This may be a 9-0 case. I'm sorry. That's I don't.
I don't think so, and here's why. So Pulsifer appealed that ruling at the district court, and it went to the 8th Circuit Court, and they also ruled against him. And it seems the only reason that the Supreme Court is hearing this case is because in like almost every district court around the country, they've had a similar scenario of people coming across the same issue.
So instead, what the law should have had is, you said it's 5 provisions with one that has a 3 provision extra. It should have just had 8 provisions, and we wouldn't be dealing with any of this. The provisions are, you don't have a 3 point, you don't have a 1 point, you don't have a this, you don't have a, and then we wouldn't be dealing with any of this. And they probably rushed it through, and now because they've given a loophole, beyond loophole, it's not even a loophole. They're now misinterpreting a word.
This is literally the question. So, district courts around the country have heard similar cases. The 4th, 9th, and 11th district courts all read the statute as and.
Right.
The 5th, 6th, and 7th, and now 8th are reading the statute as saying or.
But here's the thing I don't understand. And we want to talk about intent and everything like this. If you are writing a law and you have, it has to do this, it has to do this, and it has to do this, there is no intent from that it could potentially mean or. There's no window, there's no nothing. Unless there's some footnote that I don't know about here.
No, there's no footnote. I think... Okay, let me give you another example in the real world. Let's say we're trying to decide on where to go for dinner.
Right.
And around the corner, we have 3 options. We have Mexican, Italian, and...
sushi.
I don't know. Yeah, sushi. And so I say, we're talking, I'm talking to someone who's new to the city, doesn't know the area. I say, in this area, we have blah, blah, and blah. Mexican, sushi, and Italian. I'm not saying we're going to... That and is not saying we're going to all 3. I'm saying those are your choices, and I've conjoined it with and, but please pick one.
But I understand what you're saying, but
I'm playing devil's advocate.
No, I know that. I can understand that. And then it's like, that's pretty disprovable because you are giving an option. And there's no hint that they're giving an option with this. Especially because with something like this, it sounds like you actually do have to satisfy a lot of requirements to make something like that possible, which most drug offenders probably do not qualify. There's always some violence, there's always some extra, there's always some priors, there's always some points.
Yeah.
Yes, and?
I was rereading it just to make sure.
There was nothing that we missed.
I mean, it literally just says the defendant does not have A, B, and C.
That's in the... Yeah. Okay. Then this just sounds like it's just this sort of like craven attempt to just like get around an existing law where it's just like, fuck it. Let's just see if they'll agree. And I don't blame them for trying.
There's one other point to this that really goes in Mr. Pulsifer's favor. In criminal law, there's something called the rule of lenity. And so if a court is the rule of lenity says a court should rule in favor of the defendant in a case where the statute is vague or ambiguous.
But it's neither.
But if the point is, if these other courts are contending that it is vague, then it still should go in his favor.
Yeah, but that sounds like a little bit of a long shot here. Because this sounds like something... This is the other thing that I think is interesting to me, which is why I think this is going to be a unanimous or near unanimous decision. Because this sounds like something that may work in a jury trial, where this is the statute, and then the jury comes up with the idea that, or an attorney tells the jury, they don't come up with the idea, the attorney tells the jury, so isn't this unclear to you? Like, could you read this law and understand? Oh, yeah, it's really unclear, and my client's here, just trying to do his best, but they're just, this boot's on his neck. But even then, someone's going to say, this is the meaning of and then move it along.
I completely understand what you're saying. I do sympathize with the other side, in as much as this, whatever they decide, could potentially have a bigger precedent here. Because
if they throw this out, then or I'm sorry, if they set this precedent by saying that "and" doesn't matter anymore, if they throw out connecting words, then all law is in question.
Well, yeah, but I guess my point is, in this particular statute, the precedent would be set for this particular statute only, technically. So, in future cases, I could envision circumstances where a slightly different defendant with different circumstances might check all three boxes of disqualification, and could theoretically get by on reduced sentencing and be a really bad person, but under these strange semantics is my point. So,
but then it does more social harm than good, because this whole point was releasing people who are nonviolent offenders. But if you have these points on your record, they indicate some kind of violent offense in the past, or a repeat offender that's not somebody that you should be. It's like, oh no, got on 19. Let's let him out.
Every single other of the 5 provisions states things about nonviolent. Like, it must all be nonviolent. If there's any hint of violence, you're.
But then why would they include so many provisions about the points and stuff like that? That's the part that I don't understand.
Well, that's
If they felt it was so ironclad.
The point about the points, because that's criminal law, and I'm not sure how the point system works, to be quite honest. I don't know what's counted as 1 point, 2 point, etc. So that's a little bit of a gray area to me.
It sounds more intentional, just in thinking about it, that you would have. It sounds intentional that you would, if you were including something like that, you really would want the highest bar possible for somebody to meet. And what were the points again? Can you read through those one more time? Because you said it was 3 points for what? Because now I'm trying to get into the psychology of why would you would include all of those individual points.
The defendant does not have A, more than 4 criminal history points, excluding any criminal history points resulting from a 1 point offense.
Okay.
B, a prior 3 point offense.
Okay.
And C, a prior 2 point violent offense.
Okay, so those are all different for a reason.
Right.
One is a violent offense. You can't have a previous violent offense. One is a 3 point offense. So if it's a 3 point drug offense, which I think that's possession, intent to distribute, and maybe distribution or something. Like there's
right.
There's manufacturing or something like that. I don't know what the term is. So that's 3 points there. So it can't be somebody who was a drug maker and dealer.
Like a kingpin or something, yeah.
Right. It has to be somebody who it's there was this story about this guy that I was hearing earlier that he had meth in his car and he parked in a permit zone, and so they came to tow his car and they somehow got inside. They suspected that there was something in there, and then they found the meth, and they were trying to get him on the meth charges, and they basically got the meth charges dropped to community service because he didn't A, consent to the search, and B, who knows if it was his, all that kind of stuff, all the doubt that you can cast. So it can't be a 3 point offense, which is basically drug kingpin. Mm-hmm. It cannot be a 2 point violent offense, and then the first one is what again?
You cannot have more than 4 criminal history points, excluding any criminal history points resulting from 1 point offenses. So
okay, so you can't have the 1 point rack ups, but you can't have any. You can't have a cumulative. I guess it sounds like you can't be arrested on a 2 point and a 3 point and all that stuff, and they don't want. So there is a reason for each of those provisions.
Yes. Yeah,
okay.
Yeah.
Well, then this is bullshit. What is your court rule, Justice Judy?
I'm really up in the air because knowing all of the ifs, ands, or buts. No.
Is that going to be the title of this one? I think that has to be the title.
No pun intended. I know how this shit works, and we've seen too many times where cases have arisen where someone gets off on a technicality such as this because a precedent was set when they shouldn't have. And so I fear that if we set that precedent...
Because you're just doing this for lawyers now. You're literally doing this for criminal lawyers to just be like, but see, my client didn't get the 3-point, but he got the... It sounds like you're playing basketball here. He couldn't sink the 3-point, but he got the 1 point.
But see, here, and this is my issue, is because I'm being a little bit hypocritical here.
Yeah.
Because what I'm advocating for in saying what I just said is a more progressive look at the law. Because the conservative look at law is originalism. What does the text say? And that's where you're falling, right? It says and, it means and.
Yeah.
But if I'm thinking of consequentially down the line what this precedent could set, that's a very progressive thing to do. And I feel bad admitting that.
But I think with this, if there was a place where I could see daylight, like, yes, I think it's unnecessary that they made it 3 sub-provisions of a leading provision. I wish it was just 8 total, and then we move it along. But given the fact that that's not what you're dealing with right here, I looking at it, I'm like, I don't see the exclusion here, and I love looking for those little exclusions because I'm like, you could interpret it this way, and then this person get off, but I don't see that here.
But that very well could be a very valid argument for someone to make of, well, you made this one provision instead of making it 3 separate, so why wouldn't we read this as an or instead of an and?
Government laws and regulations have a lot of shit like that, where there's like Proviso C, Section 1, and then also this and this and this and this. So it's riddled with stuff like that, and I think that the only reason is because that's almost like the language of government and the law and the way that they speak. Like there has to be these like, and then we have to have this, and then we have to have this, and then we have to have this, and it's like, oh god, okay, fine, like, you know.
So this all boils down to, as you write laws, you know,
be clear.
People in Congress, people in state legislatures, hire some damn linguists. Give some of my colleagues some jobs.
It's interesting because they used to say how many members of Congress and presidents have been attorneys and stuff like that, where they knew the law and they could speak the law. But I think that being a linguist is also very helpful when it comes to politics, because you're able to, A, effectively communicate, B, effectively listen to bullshit, and C, being able to craft law that is not just going to get overturned in a few years or challenged by courts because what they wrote was just mumble jumble garbage.
Because a linguist can help you find those loopholes and semantic flaws, just like this.
Because I guarantee when they write these laws, there is no one in that room who's like, okay, let's look at it and find loopholes. They're just like, okay, just get it done. Like some poor staffer in Dianne Feinstein's office, some poor gay, is just sitting there just, like drafting laws deep into the night. And so we're working off of one staffer's, missed Vyvanse prescription.
But it has drastic consequences, as we see here. So, Congress, do better. Staffers, do better. Hire some linguists.
I agree.
But, case dismissed for now.
We'll see.